Hello, everybody. Welcome to this Values Jam, the guest series session. I'm delighted to be joined by Alan Zimmerman. Hi, Alan.
Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you might be.
Yeah, that's right. People from all over the world watching this, hopefully. Thank you very much for sparing some time to have a Values Jam. I'm really excited to do this. I've followed your work for years. I can't really remember how many years actually. But perhaps you'd just like to start by introducing yourself and the great work that you do.
Yeah, kind of an interesting career path. Entrepreneur all my life. At age 7, I was selling greeting cards door to door. By age 14, I owned a small international import business. I quickly made it through college and I was teaching at the University of Minnesota by age 21. I was a professor for 15 years, selected standing member of 2 universities, and I retired at 35. And went into full-time speaking, training, consulting, and coaching, which I've been doing for a long time, given some 3,000 programs live across the world. And now my schedule's filled with a lot of CEOs who want one-on-one coaching.
Wow. And I bet it's really interesting talking to those guys at this time, because it seems to me that the requirement for leadership has fundamentally changed over the last couple of years.
It has changed. The one thing that has stayed the same is this particular group of people, CEOs, they have nobody to talk to.
Yeah.
They can't share their innermost thoughts, feelings, concerns with their coworkers, their competitors, their employees. And a lot of times their spouse doesn't understand or doesn't care to hear about those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's see what card comes up for us. So what we're going to do is take a card from the Values Jam card deck. We'll see if it's of interest to both of us, and then
Okay.
we'll go with it. So why don't you help me select a card? How many times would you like me to cut the deck?
Well, let's do it twice.
Okay. And so I have 3 piles in front of me. Would you like left, middle, or right?
Let's go the middle.
Okay. And here, I'm just going to do a quick count of the cards. Number between 1 and 22, Alan.
How about number 10?
Number 10.
Kindness. Aha.
So we start with the same question with a Values Jam, and then we'll just see what the conversation, where the conversation takes us, and then we'll end with a particular question. So what does kindness mean? And after the more kind of technical description of it, please have a think about what it looks, feels, and sounds like. So first off, what does kindness mean?
To me, it's a gentle caring, going out of my way to make somebody else's life better, their day more effective, doing something I wouldn't have to do, but choose to do, because that person has value, that I want to make their day somehow different. I want my contact with somebody else to make a difference.
Yeah, I like this, a number of the things that you've said there. So the choice thing is really important.
Yeah. I often hear people say when I talk about whether it's kindness or a lot of other topics, well, I don't feel like it. And to me, that's one of the big obstacles in life right now. I'll tell people that your feelings get a voice in your decision, but they don't get a veto. You do it because it's the right thing to do, not necessarily the easy thing to do.
Yeah, and also it's I think kindness is vastly underrated in terms of its impact, and it's unlike so many other things in that it's an untapped reservoir with no bottom. You know, it's like you can be as kind as you like to as many people as you like when you choose to do it. But yeah, as you said, it's choice.
And the cost is almost zero in terms of time, money, energy. People might cop out, so I don't have time for all that stuff. It takes almost no time. It just takes the way you do it instead of taking a lot of extra time.
Yeah. There's something also about awareness and observation and being tuned in to allow yourself to recognize the opportunities. I'm not sort of saying this to say, look at me, but I was at the supermarket last week, and I had quite a lot of stuff to go through the checkout. And there was a lady that came behind me waiting in turn, and she just had like 4 or 5 items. So because I recognized it, I just said to her, do you want to go through? And do you want to go before me? And she was just unbelievably pleased.
Yes, yes.
But without recognizing the opportunity, I think that's the key point.
I think you're exactly right. Being more observant, that we're so focused on what we have to do, have to get done, the next step, the next goal, the next thing on the to-do list, and in the process miss all kinds of opportunities.
Mm. And do you think that's something to do with society kind of shaping us to be me-centric rather than we-centric?
Oh, heavens, yes. Yeah. The all about me. It's become such a big focus. I see it everything from our daily interactions at work. We're all so busy. I see it like the supermarket, like you mentioned. I came here first, don't cut in line,
Yeah,
to even the way people drive their cars.
for sure, for sure. Okay, and so what about the metaphor, Alan? What does kindness sound like, look like, feel like?
Hmm. What does it sound like? Certainly, tone of voice is a big part of that if you're speaking to somebody else. Uh, some of our listeners may have dogs, and you can say a nasty comment, the same words in a kind tone of voice, or those same words in a different tone of voice, and get a whole different reaction. They're
Yeah,
very tone related. And so be aware of tone. I'm amazed how many times people aren't even aware of the tone of their voice
mm,
and the impact it might have. When we had kids, raising the kids, we would often say tone, tone.
yeah. It's so important. And you used the word at the beginning of the conversation, gentle, and I think that for me is the sound of kindness.
Yeah.
Um, it's not in a rush. It's kind of measured, calm. Gentle is the perfect word, I think. And what does it feel? It feels warm to me, um, caring. I feel safe when I think of kindness, and I feel cared for when I think about kindness. Any other metaphors come to your mind?
Yeah, kindness is not an obligation, it's an opportunity. That some people think, well, I just have to be nice to customers, or I have to be nice or kind to this person in my family, whether I like them or not. That obligation tone, if you will, or behavior is picked up quite readily. And so I think it comes from the motivation of this is an opportunity
Yeah,
to be more, to give more.
yeah. And it has to come from within, doesn't it? To be true kindness.
Yeah, it does. But there are people that are not wired very kindly.
Yeah,
They're naturally, if you will, rude, abrasive, aggressive, and that doesn't excuse them. I really believe this is a behavior you can learn. If we didn't believe in education, we wouldn't be having these conversations. We wouldn't have schooling.
yeah.
And so when people tell me, well, that's just the way I am, I don't buy it. You may have a tendency to be that way. You may have been trained that way. It doesn't mean you can't be different.
I resonate so strongly with that. And in the work that I do, sometimes, when I'm talking to people in organizations and we're talking about translating the organizational values into practical behaviors, they say, oh, but we do that all the time. We do that naturally. And I'm like, well, yeah, but do you do it excellently? because so often we're on autopilot. And I use the example
Yeah.
of the Rolling Stones or Roger Federer. Do you think either of them turn up and expect to be excellent? No, they practice an
Yeah.
awful lot.
Yeah.
And yet we don't in our lives. We fail to practice so much.
Yeah. Yeah. When it comes to behaviors like kindness, call them personality characteristics, a lot of people just think that's the way I am, always been that way, can't change. That's the way I was raised. And those are big lies. They're obstacles. It makes it easy to behave that way, but not impossible to behave differently.
Yeah. And I have a confession to make here, Alan. So you've reminded me of when I'm driving, when you give way to somebody coming in the opposite direction, it really winds me up when they don't say thank you, if they don't signal. And so if I sense that they're not going to do that, I actually go first, as if to say, I'm saying thank you. You need to say the same, which is a bit unkind of me, probably.
Well, the example that comes to my mind is when I'm talking to audiences, an example I'll often use is greeting some coworkers who pass by in the hallway. And there are some people you can say, good morning, how are you doing? Have a great day, good to see you. You can greet them every day for weeks on end, months on end, and they never respond back. They don't say good morning back, hello, they say nothing. They just walk by. And it's easy for us, I think, at that point to come down to their level and not be kind.
Yeah.
And just behave the same way. I'll forget them and walk by and never greet them. And I always challenge my audiences, again, you do it because it's the right thing to do, not the easy thing to do.
Yeah, keep going.
Yes.
One day they will say good morning.
I hear that story all the time. That eventually, it may make months, they might have a little smirk or a smile or a nod of the head, but some acknowledgement that you're getting through to them.
Yeah. And actually, you just touched on there this unknown. So you've reminded me, we were talking before we started to record, didn't we, about memories coming back. So this is a memory from probably 5 or 6 years ago. And we'd been talking about poverty. And after the meeting, my colleague, a lady, decided to give some money to a homeless guy on the street corner because she was conscious that we'd been talking about poverty and wanted to do something positive. So she put her hand in her pocket and got a few pound coins and put it in his hat. And she told the story that she then heard him say, "Haven't you got a £5 note, love?" So this guy was asking for more, and it triggered her, and she got upset and walked off. But when we were talking about it, we were saying, actually, we will never know what the impact was on that guy of your reaction. So it might be that he won't be rude like that again in the future because he twigged what had happened. And I find this whole thing around what my colleague Jenny Haas talks about, the ripple effect of kindness.
Yeah.
And we never know.
Yeah. I'll share a story along that line. I do a two-day program called Journey to the Extraordinary that I've been doing for many, many years. 2-day intensive 16 hours of training. First day on 6 keys to personal excellence, and second day on positive relationships. And this is when I was a young fellow. I was teaching at a hospital, just doing a couple-hour presentation, and a lady walks in the back of the room who was substituting that day for another person that was absent, got mesmerized by my presentation, sat down the entire 2 hours, came up to me and said, "You have that on a recording?" And I said, "Oh, it happened. Yes, I do." She got a copy of it, didn't hear from her for 20 years.
What?
And she contacted me and said, "I want you to know I listened to that cassette tape that was the old days until I wore it out. And then I transcribed it word for word. And I've lived my whole life according to those principles." So the story goes on. She was 65 then. She comes to my 2-day journey program at age 90. She writes me and says, "I need a refresher. I haven't heard you speak for years." could I come? And I said, well, yes, you certainly can, but this is 16 hours intense. And trying not to say it quite so directly, you're 90 years of age. Can you put up with that kind of intensity? Oh, yeah, I can do that. No problem. She came, sat in the front row, and took notes furiously. One of the things I teach is finding your purpose in life. And she came out, her purpose was, goes with our theme, I want to create racial harmony in the city of St. Louis through music. Well, she started a whole program, came back at age 95 for another refresher, and revised her purpose. And here's what she started: the national movement in the United States called Be Kind. She started out at 95 teaching kindergartners, middle school, high school, football players, got the whole community involved, of what they can do to show kindness every day to people around them, got the whole community involved in planting flowers for everybody's yards. I just heard from her 2 days ago. She's still managing this movement. She's 101 right now. She's as sharp as you and I on this telephone call. They've got T-shirts and national movement.
What's her name?
Margaret Peterson.
Okay.
And she wrote me this lovely letter. And I told her that it's been inspiring me for years. She's taken this Be Kind thing to a national level. Because she saw on TV rudeness everywhere, on the talk shows, rudeness in people's behavior and everyday interactions, and said, enough's enough. Whether you call her old school, she said, we didn't grow up that way, and I don't want to see the next generation be that way.
Wow, well, I'd love to be introduced to her, because this year, we're still in this year, I got involved with the World Kindness Movement. And the World Kindness Movement has been in place for 25 years, which is, a real achievement.
Yes.
But up until this year, they'd really focused on their members. And I kind of said to them, it seems to me that there are a whole load of people interested in the concept of kindness. Couldn't the World Kindness Movement be the lead to bring everybody together rather than ploughing their own furrow? So they created a One Voice for Kindness campaign, which was celebrated up until November. And so I'm just wondering whether Margaret Peterson would be interested to be involved in that.
After this phone call, I will send you her email and let you contact her.
Cool. Okay, great.
Yeah, all right. She's a lovely person.
Fantastic.
So it's fun that make this connection.
Yeah. So let's take the conversation a slightly different direction, because I feel that we've been really upbeat so far. So let's try and jar ourselves into something else. So here's a question: where have you noticed unkindness?
Several areas. In the business world, when I'm a customer, I'm amazed at how many times sales clerks, salespeople don't go the extra step to show kindness. And I've tried this experiment on different occasions. I will go to a grocery store, check out my groceries, and typically I'm very conversational, kind, outgoing. That's just who I am. I want to meet people, make their day. But I'll go in and decide I'm not going to say a word. I'm just going to lay down my groceries and just wait for that person to speak. And many times the clerk will pass the groceries through the computer, scan everything, bag the groceries, hand me a receipt, and never say welcome, good morning, hello, thank you, anything, not a word. I think that's jarred me. It's like I don't exist.
Yeah. Do you actually make a statement, Alan, or do you just walk away?
Typically, I just walked away. I'm both. I've walked away, or I've also said, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Again, I don't want to come down to behaving like them.
Yeah.
Also jarred, I think, on a personal level. I'm of the school where when you give gifts, you go out of your way, to recognize someone's birthday, a Christmas, a holiday, that they say thank you. I think it's appropriate, it's kind. And I see it more and more that handwritten notes are almost a thing of the past.
Yeah.
It may be a phone call, but that's almost a thing of the past.
Yeah.
If you're lucky, a quick text.
Yeah.
And to me, each of those things were missing. Losing the written note, because it takes a little more time and commitment. The phone call takes a little more time and commitment. Throwing those things away is moving us away from kindness.
Yeah, and do you think you're making me wonder about the relationship between the gift and the thought behind the gift? And it makes me wonder whether the two have become somewhat detached, actually. So when we receive a gift, the focus is on, what is it?
Yes.
Rather than thinking about what thought process they've gone through in order to give you that gift.
Yeah, it goes back to your comment of it's about me. What do I get?
Yeah.
Not about the relationship we're trying to build here.
Yeah. And going back to your example of unkindness, I'm going to take the opposite side of the fence here, because I find sometimes that customers are quite unkind to people in service situations.
Yes.
So my original career was in commercial hospitality management. So I used to run 5-star hotels and conference centers and that sort of thing. And I didn't retire at 35. and when I go into, say, a coffee shop, I make a point of saying, hello, how are you?
Yeah.
Before I'm greeted by them.
Yes.
And actually, this wasn't a coffee shop setting. It was a hospital. I was visiting my ex-mother-in-law, and I wanted to find out about her diet because there was something that I didn't understand. So I found a doctor, and I just said to him, "Hi, how are you?" And he just stopped. It was like he was frozen. And he said, this is the 12th hour of today's shift for me, and nobody has asked me that question.
Wow.
And we had a brilliant conversation. He gave me the information that I was after. But sometimes as customers, we kind of think that we're dealing with robots, not human beings, I think.
Yeah, there was just a research study that came out a short time ago that reaffirmed that they were surveying servers in restaurants and surveying people who are gate agents for airlines.
Oh, okay.
And they were reporting how much better service they willingly give to their customers who are extra kind, who call them by name, remember their name, ask about their day, say something. They'll get better service in the restaurant. And they were saying in the same survey, gate agents have a fair amount of discretion. And if you're extra kind, they may find that better seat, first class upgrade, free glass of wine. They tend to take care of people like that.
Yeah.
So it sounds simplistic, but kindness pays.
Certainly does. And there's something there as well about the weakness of being too prescriptive about what you want from your service employees, because then what you just described as that personal discretion is removed. And so it's like, why should I bother? Yeah. Whereas if you give people that latitude, I believe, at heart, people are kind, and they are wanting to please somebody else. And if they've got that latitude, then they can do that. It's actually, I mentioned the World Kindness Movement. The immediate past president is a lady called Nemala Peters Mendeley. And she's got an HR background. And we were talking recently about, wouldn't it be interesting in the recruitment process if you assessed how kind somebody was, and that was a part of the selection criteria?
Yeah.
I would be fascinated to discover what a company that was full of kind people performed like compared to a company full of people that were not.
That's a very interesting comment. I remember my first professorship It was a 3-day interview where I did some teaching so they could watch me teach, see how effectively I did that. Talked to each professor in the department. Went through 3 days. The interview went beautifully. The last interview was with the chairman of the department, who would be my boss if he chose to hire me. And he looked at me very sternly across the table and said, "You look really, really darn good, young man. But I want you to tell you one thing. I don't care how much you know, how well you teach. We've got a great team here that gets along well. If you mess that up, you're out of here." Another, his way of saying kindness, we get along, we care about each other.
Yeah.
And if I couldn't meet that standard, nothing else mattered.
How did you do?
Great. I was there for quite a long time.
All right, so on the Values Jam cards, there's also an opportunity to create your own question. So this is ask your own question about kindness, beginning with who, what, where, when, why, or how. So would you like to have a go?
Okay. My own question for myself and for others would be, how can I be more consciously aware every day of who might be a recipient of my kindness? And I'm a spiritual person, so one prayer I actually do every day is I'll say, "Lord, show me whose life I can touch today. Who do you want me to reach out to? Put them in my path. Make me aware of who they are. Make me more conscious of what they might need, what I can do to make a little difference." And so I start my day with that prayer, actually.
So is that your answer as well, Alan?
Yes, yeah. The question would be, how can I be more aware?
Yeah,
of
and so your way,
who's around me and what they might need and what I can do.
Yeah. And I think that, so I'm not a religious person, but I share what you've just described, because I think that if you consciously put yourself in a state of mind and you use prayer, I tend to use an affirmation at the beginning of the day, which is in honor of one of my values, in a very practical way. So if I relate it to kindness, one of my practices could be to offer help to a stranger today. And I reinforce that by, I have a quotation, an image, and a soundtrack that I use to reinforce the practice. And that kind of makes you more tuned in. You'll see the opportunity, more likely you'll see the opportunity, and you'll be ready to dive in when it happens. So I think we're on the same page, but from different angles.
Exactly. And I think sometimes people think kindness is limited to such things as you open a door for somebody or let them pass you on the highway. One of the most frequent ways I practice kindness is showing genuine interest, that I might meet somebody and find out their name. And I always have a question or two or three to ask them if time looks like it's going to be permissible.
Yeah.
I hear a name and say, "Shit, I've never heard that name before. What nationality is that? Tell me about your background a little bit." Or maybe I notice something about them, like, that's a really good looking, whatever they might be wearing. And I'm finding that people love to answer those questions. Someone's engaging them beyond just, "Hi, how are you doing?" "Fine." So greeting's one thing, but showing some interest. And so it means you have to be observational. What can I notice? What can I ask? Then we get a conversation going. I just flew yesterday after the Christmas mess of airlines in America, with thousands of them canceled. And so I go up to the gate agent and I said, "You must be exhausted after all these thousands of flights canceled the last 2-3 days." He said, "Well, actually, I'm doing pretty well. We're getting things under control, but thanks for asking. I appreciate that."
Yeah.
They're just asking a question.
And it seems to be a recurring theme of this conversation is something around relationships and genuine care between two people, rather than the just getting on with the functionality of your life for your own interest. So that seems to be we've touched on it. I just noticed a few times during the last 30 minutes, we've touched on those things.
And you mentioned genuine caring. Absolutely agree with that. But going back to our previous comment, if a person doesn't feel the caring, doesn't mean they can't be kind still.
Yeah. And it is, so I think the generally accepted theory is that we start with what we think, and then that determines what we do.
Right.
But I believe that it can work the other way around as well.
Oh, absolutely. It's we can feel our way into a new way of acting, but it's just as true we can act our way into a new way of feeling.
Yeah. Go ahead.
It's the act as if principle. If a person wants to become more patient, they might say, well, I'm not patient. I lose my temper. That's the way my dad was, my mom was, just the way I was raised, can't help it. And I will challenge that. Irrelevant. You force yourself to act patiently, even if your guts are churning inside. Eventually, you will feel patient and be patient. And the same principle, I'm sure, applies to kindness. You may not feel all that kind. It may have been a tough day for you. You may feel grouchy, rude, and angry. Again, irrelevant. You still choose your next behavior.
Yeah. I think you're reminding me of Karate Kid 2, the movie, where, and I use these two video clips. So the one is where the old guy is teaching the young boy to hang his coat on the post, take his coat off, put it on the floor, pick it up. So he repeats this, for hour and hour and hour. And then the second clip is where the old guy goes to attack the kid, who blocks him by making exactly the same movements as he was doing with his coat. And I use that to make the point that you've just made, where, there's a beautiful moment in it, actually, where he does the first block and he looks at his hands as if to say, how did you guys do that? It's because he's practiced.
Yeah. William James, a famous psychologist from the early 20th century, he was at Harvard, a professor, and he made the comment, we do not sing because we're happy because we sing.
I had not heard that. That's great. What's his name?
William James. He was the father of so-called American psychology. That's now recognized around the world as a key concept. We do not sing because we're happy because we sing. In other words, act first, then feel.
Yeah.
In other words, again, be kind.
Yeah.
And eventually you're going to feel kind.
All right, so let's go really big now. Let's go really big. How could more kindness improve the world?
I almost want to laugh out loud in the sense that American politics have become so rude and so nasty for so long.
You're not the only ones.
On all sides of the political spectrum, doesn't matter left or right.
Yeah.
That I come from a communication background. My PhD is communication and psychology, and truth always came from civil debate of differing points of view. Now what I'm seeing is not debate of points of view, is calling people nasty names and defaming character, and the issues are never really discussed.
Yeah.
So kindness is so desperately needed, especially if we're going to maintain democracies, a civil way of discourse and making progress. Without the kindness element, we're in trouble.
Yeah, and I think your targeting of politics is so on the money, and it's the same here. Politics is dreadful.
Yeah.
And I can't remember who said this, but basically they were saying that we've got the same system in place as we had 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a fundamental difference in that 100 years ago, people used to be decent and they understood the role that they were playing, but they were still decent, irrespective of what side, and they respected that. Whereas now that decency is no longer there. And without that, the system can't work.
Yeah, exactly. I've followed politics very carefully all my life. That was my minor in college. I have keen interest in it. And the narrative used to be in America, maybe in Britain as well, the UK, that people would be opposing points of view and argue vigorously about a particular issue, and then they go and have dinner together that night.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't happen, and they're calling each other names like, instead of our friends on the other side of the aisle, instead of our honorable opposition, those terms are gone. It's domestic terrorists, liars, thieves. It's name calling of the worst type.
Yeah. And language sets the tone, right?
Oh, yes, yes. Now, how do you have a civil, kind conversation with people who think you're a domestic terrorist, you're evil, you're satanic, you're rotten to the core? That's how they portrayed you. They talk about you. The chance for a kind civil discourse is pretty minimal.
Mm-hmm. And so if your government asked you to sort it out for them through implementing kinder conversations, how would you start that?
I do it the same way I do with my coaching clients. I just had two CEOs I was working with, or a CEO and a vice president, running a very successful company, very profitable, but they were starting to hate each other. They would avoid each other, and they'd have nasty conversations, slam doors in each other's face, etc. And one of the first things I had to implement with them is they had to come up with what I call rules of engagement. What will we do when we talk to each other? What will we not do? And abide by those. And it changed everything.
Yeah.
That before we start talking about the issues and going down the same rabbit hole of calling names and not listening and getting temperamental, how are we going to talk before we talk about what the subject is?
Yeah, and this is happening quite a lot in this conversation, this thing about memories from a long time ago. So this must be 2009, something like that. So it's a story about two colleagues. One, I think, was based in New York, and the other was based in London. One was an operations guy, and the other was a finance guy. And they were just at loggerheads.
Mm-hmm.
There was a company conference for their top leaders. So these two guys were invited, and they just happened to be on the same group for an exercise whereby a load of big cardboard boxes were wheeled into the room and delivered to each of the groups of 10 people. And they were given a briefing that their customers were going to arrive in 90 minutes or something. And inside the packaging were bicycles that needed to be put together.
Yeah.
So they did this. And then after the 90 minutes, kids from a local disadvantaged children's school arrived to collect their bikes. And these guys were all welled up. Tears were flowing. These kids left with their bikes happy as Larry. And those two guys never had a fight again. So there's something about positive shared experiences to cut through that rubbish that tends to happen as well.
That's a great example. When I'm working with a team, an organization that's got poor morale, anxiety, angst, anger, disrespect, all those things going on when they're not ruled by kindness. I've been teaching a technique for a long time called the 3 V's. And it's kind of V's like Victor. Yeah. And it sounds silly, and they kind of make fun of it in the beginning, but it works. And I say, when you're having meetings, when you're interacting in a group setting, if you hear someone putting somebody else down, not disagreeing with the idea, but, oh, that's stupid, or where'd you come up with that dumb idea, or John, you're always off in left field. If you hear them putting someone down, that's called a viper, like the snake, the forked tongue.
Yeah.
And just tell people, and it tells people quickly, stop it. If someone is putting themselves down, like, oh, I don't know, I have nothing to contribute on this subject, I'm not up to date. In other words, they're copping out and putting themselves down, call it a vulture, like a little gawk son of a vulture, like they're ripping out their own guts, as vultures rip out guts of other animals. And if they hear someone, saying, "Hey, thanks, Sean, for sharing. Mildred, I like that. Thank you." It's a V, like validation.
Yeah.
And so we're having a meeting, and they do exactly that.
Yeah.
They laugh a little bit and think it's kind of silly. It's like kindergartenish, but it works. They catch each other and they stop doing the bad stuff.
Yeah. And it's this thing about, again, knocking us out of our autopilot and just giving us, like you say, what might sound trivial, but actually highly effective tools, as long as you practice them and put them into use. Because that's what I find. You've mentioned a few times the work that you do. What I really like about the examples that you've given is that people can go away and actually do something with it, rather than so much of today, in my opinion, is content based and knowledge based.
Yeah.
So you walk back into your workplace with this knowledge that is then forgotten within a week, and you don't actually put it into practice.
Yeah. That's what I often tell people, that education without application serves no useful purpose.
Absolutely. Well, this year I've started to use a phrase which is content without context is toast.
Yeah.
And it's the same message, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, so this has been, the time has flown actually, Alan, but let's deal with the last question. And that is, what are you encouraged to do differently about kindness as a result of our conversation today?
Well, it hit me as we talked that I probably talk the subject better than I do the subject.
Okay.
That I believe in kindness. I'm delighted to see that card came up. But I think I'm guilty, like many people, of sometimes being too much on autopilot. And even though I try to make it a conscious part of my day, there's room for improvement.
So could I just press you, what's your first baby step towards that then?
Okay. First baby step. I'm going out to do a couple of errands today, and I'm going to make sure that the people I interact with, sales clerks, whoever they might be, that I do a little bit more than good morning, hello, but I really try to make a comment that they probably have not heard for a long time. It might be the way they do their job. You're so efficient. Or I certainly like that smile. Something that would be more than just a greeting, but it tells them that I notice something special about them.
Yeah, you're giving me a tingle on my neck. I did a talk at the RAF Club, which is a private members club in London.
I've stayed there, I know it.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So I got there early to make sure that the room was okay and I could suss things out. And there was a lady polishing the brass handrail of the staircase.
Yeah.
And she was doing this for about half an hour, I guess. And so when she had finished, before she walked away, I just went over to her and said, I was watching you and you were paying real careful attention to that. And it looks fantastic. And you could see her grow and walk away as if she was on air.
Yeah.
And thank you. I haven't thought of that for many years. So thank you so much for, I don't know what it was. It's about saying something that they haven't heard for some time. And yeah, it can make such a difference. Mine is to get in touch with Margaret Peterson. That's easy.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Alan, thank you so much for this kindness values jam. It's been, I'm a little bit emotional actually. I'm feeling thrilled. So thank you so much.
This has been very worthwhile. So thank you.
Okay, cheers.
Bye-bye.